I shouldn't have knocked. That's the first thing that comes to mind, even now. Her door was only a few feet from mine, the wood frame worn from years of weather and careless movers. I'd been staring at it for a long time, longer than I want to admit, before I finally raised my hand. My excuse was simple enough. The leak from her upstairs sink had begun dripping into my bathroom ceiling. But I think, deep down, I wanted to hear her voice. When she opened the door, the hallway light caught her hair just right. Chestnut. A few streaks of silver she didn't bother to hide, falling loose around her face. She looked tired, like she had been carrying more than one kind of weight. Still, her presence filled the doorway in a way that made me forget the reason I'd come. "You shouldn't knock so loud," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "He's not home. Come in quietly." The words hung there, sharp and unexpected, like she had already decided I belonged inside. My throat tightened, and I hesitated. But she stepped aside, barefoot on polished wood floors, and I crossed into her living room as if I'd done it before. The house smelled faintly of lavender and strong coffee. A half-folded blanket rested on the couch, a book face down beside it. Everything looked lived in, but not messy, the kind of home that felt warm even without anyone saying a word. She moved quickly to the kitchen sink, twisting the handle, testing the faucet. "Is this why you came? The leak?" she asked, not quite looking at me. "Yeah," I said, then added too quickly, "I thought maybe I could help." My voice sounded younger than I wanted it to. Her laugh was short, almost surprised. "You? A plumber? I can try." I shrugged, stepping closer. "Or at least, I can hold the flashlight." Finally, she looked at me, really looked. Her eyes carried something I couldn't name, but it made me shift my weight and lower my gaze. I followed her toward the kitchen. The sink dripped steadily into a metal bowl, each drop echoing louder than it should have. We stood there in the silence, and I realized how close we were. Her sleeve brushed my arm as she reached for a wrench. My chest tightened again, but I said nothing. "You're too young for this," she muttered, almost to herself. "For plumbing." I tried to make it light, but my voice cracked halfway through. Her lips curved, half a smile, half something else. "For knocking on doors like mine." The words made my skin burn. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I didn't. Instead, I bent under the sink, pretending to study the pipes. She knelt beside me, the fabric of her dress brushing against my shoulder. For a moment, the world shrank to the sound of her breathing, the faint trace of her perfume, the warmth radiating between us. "Careful," she said softly as my hand slipped. Her fingers touched mine. Just long enough to steady the wrench, just long enough to blur the line between accident and intention. I froze. She didn't move her hand right away. Her eyes lingered on me, searching, as if waiting for me to say something I wasn't brave enough to say. The dripping stopped. The silence didn't. When I finally pulled back, I caught her watching me with that same unreadable look. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, as if weighing a choice. "You should probably go," she said, though her voice wavered at the edges. I nodded but didn't step away. Her gaze softened. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she whispered. I should have walked out the moment she gave me the choice. But the word stay carried more weight than it should have, like it was already pulling me deeper into a place I didn't belong. "I don't want to intrude," I managed, though my feet stayed planted. Her eyes flicked away, toward the dark window over the sink. "You're not. It's just quiet here when he's gone." She stopped, as if realizing she'd said too much. Her arms folded tighter, a shield against her own words. I told myself I should ignore it, but my eyes caught details I couldn't stop cataloging. The faint crease at the corner of her mouth, the way she tugged absent-mindedly at her sleeve, the half-empty mug on the counter with lipstick smudged against the rim. Small things that made her seem less like a figure I admired from a distance, and more like someone lonely, sitting too long in her own silence. "You read a lot?" I asked, nodding to the book on the couch. Her mouth curved slightly. I try. Helps pass the nights. I wanted to ask why her nights needed passing. Instead, I said nothing, and the quiet grew heavier. She studied me for a moment that lasted too long, and then she sighed. He doesn't notice things like that anymore, she murmured. The confession slipped out before she could catch it, and I felt a sting in my chest. Dangerous ground. I was the neighbor, the younger one, the one who wasn't supposed to hear what her husband ignored. I cleared my throat, trying to shake it off. Maybe he just doesn't know how. Her laugh was soft, brittle. After this many years, you'd think he would have learned. I looked at her then, really looked. She was older, yes, but there was a kind of grace in her weariness, in the way she carried herself even when she was unraveling a little. My stomach tightened. This wasn't what I'd come here for. I reminded myself of that again and again. But when she moved past me to set the wrench down, her hand brushed my arm, deliberately or not, and my thoughts scattered. You're kind to even try helping, she said gently, her voice steadier now. Most people your age wouldn't bother. I wanted to answer, to make some careless joke about not being most people, but the words lodged in my throat. Her fingers lingered a second too long on my sleeve before she pulled back. You don't have to rush off. Not yet. The invitation was quiet, careful, but it hung in the room like a challenge. My pulse hammered in my ears. I thought about the door, about how close it was. I thought about her, about how close she was. And then, without meaning to, I said her name for the first time. Came out softer than I intended, like a secret I'd been holding too long. Her head lifted, eyes catching mine. The air shifted. You shouldn't say it like that, she whispered. But she didn't look away. Her words still hung between us, warning and invitation tangled together. I should have backed away, made some excuse, but instead I stayed rooted, my chest tight with things I couldn't say. She turned, walking toward the couch, the hem of her dress brushing just above her ankles. You don't have to stand there like you're about to bolt. I'm not, I lied, even as my hand twitched toward the door. Then sit, she said softer now. I crossed the room, careful, like every step was an admission. The book she'd left face down was still there. I picked it up without thinking, reading the underlined sentence on the page. Sometimes, silence is the loudest answer. Do you mark everything you read? I asked, my voice unsteady. Her eyes lingered on the book, then shifted to me. Only the parts one don't want to forget. The way she said it felt heavier than the words themselves. I set the book down carefully, afraid of breaking something that wasn't mine. She eased onto the couch beside me, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body in the quiet space between us. Her hand reached to adjust the blanket, and for a fraction of a second her fingers brushed against mine. Too brief to be deliberate, too long to be ignored. My chest ached. I swallowed. This feels dangerous? She finished, her eyes fixed forward. Yes. Neither of us moved, but the air around us shifted. My thoughts raced. Neighbors gossiping, her husband's name, the 1,000 reasons I should stand up and leave. But then she spoke again, her voice low, almost breaking. Sometimes I forget what it's like to be noticed. The honesty in her tone made me look at her. Really look. The strength she carried in her posture, the curve of her shoulders under the weight of years, the flicker of sadness in her eyes. It all made my chest tighten until I thought I'd burst. Before I could stop myself, I said quietly, I notice. Her head turned, and for a heartbeat we just stared at each other. The silence was enough to drown me, and then a sharp buzz cut through the room. Her phone lit up on the table. She flinched, reaching quickly to silence it. The name on the screen flashed once before disappearing. Him. Neither of us spoke as she placed the phone face down, her hand lingering on it too long. I started, but my voice cracked. I wanted to stand. I wanted to leave. I wanted to stay. She touched my arm lightly, not pulling, just a whisper of contact. "Don't," she said, almost pleading. My breath caught. The room felt too small, too warm. I knew if I stayed another minute, I wouldn't be able to pretend this was innocent. And then, softer than a secret, she asked, "Do you ever wonder what would happen if we stopped pretending?" Her question cut through me like a blade. "Do you ever wonder what would happen if we stopped pretending?" The silence afterward was unbearable. I wanted to answer, but every word that came to mind felt dangerous, irreversible. "Yes," I said finally, my voice hoarse. "All the time." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. She looked at me as if weighing the risk of believing me. The room seemed smaller now, the air thicker. "You shouldn't," she whispered, shaking her head. "You're too young to carry something like this. You don't understand what it costs." I leaned forward, unable to stop myself. "Then explain it. Tell me why I shouldn't." Her eyes burned with something between anger and sorrow. "Because once you start down that road, there's no undoing it. No pretending it didn't happen. No erasing the guilt." Her words should have been enough to end it. But instead of pulling away, she stayed. Her hands twisted in her lap, restless, betraying nerves she tried to hide. I wanted to reach out, to still them, but I clenched my fists instead. "I'm not afraid of guilt," I said quietly. "You should be," she snapped. Too quickly, too sharp. Her voice cracked. "You think this is about you? It isn't. It's about me. My marriage. My mistakes. She stopped. The word hung in the air like smoke. "Your regrets," I finished softly. Her eyes glistened, and she let out a shaky breath. "Yes, my regrets." The honesty in her voice broke something in me. For weeks, months maybe, I'd admired her from a safe distance, convincing myself it was harmless. But hearing her admit that weight, that loneliness, tore through every wall I'd built. I reached for her hand before I could think better of it. She didn't pull away. Her fingers trembled against mine, but she didn't let go. "Don't," she whispered again, but this time it sounded like pleading, not warning. My chest ached. "Then tell me to leave. Mean it, and I will." She stared at me, eyes searching, lips trembling. Seconds stretched into eternity. The clock ticked loudly in the background, counting down a choice neither of us wanted to make. "I can't," she admitted finally. Her voice was barely audible, but it was enough. Something shifted then. The fragile thread between us pulled tight, almost breaking. Her hand tightened around mine for a fraction of a second, and then she released it as if scared of herself. The silence after was unbearable. My heart pounded so hard I thought she could hear it. She looked at me, raw and unguarded, and asked the one question that changed everything. Her question still echoed in my chest. "What happens if I let you stay tonight?" When the sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. She jolted upright, hand flying to her chest. I froze. Another knock followed, heavier this time, rattling the frame. "Don't move," she whispered, her eyes wide. She crossed the room quickly, smoothing her hair, forcing calm into her posture. I stayed on the couch, my pulse hammering, every instinct screaming to run. Through the peephole, she hesitated, then exhaled in relief. She opened the door just enough to reveal a woman's voice. "Hey, it's me. Sorry for dropping by." I recognized it instantly, her sister. I'd seen them together in the courtyard before, though we'd never spoken. Panic clawed at me. If she stepped inside, she'd see me immediately. "Now's not a good time," my neighbor said quickly, her voice clipped. "Can we talk tomorrow?" But her sister pushed lightly at the door, frowning. "You sound strange. Is something wrong?" I caught the tremor in her hands as she pressed the door closed, forcing a smile. "Nothing's wrong. I'm tired, that's all." "Tomorrow? Okay." Her sister hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. Tomorrow." Footsteps retreated down the hall. The moment the elevator doors shut, she locked the door and leaned against it, eyes closed, her breath shuddering out of her. I stood, unsure what to do. She almost... I know. Her voice broke. God, I know. I wanted to comfort her. But before I could, she turned, her expression raw. Do you realize what that would have meant if she walked in? What she would think of me? Her words stung. Not because they were harsh, but because they held the truth I'd been trying to ignore. To the world, I wasn't her friend, her confidant, or her escape. I was just the boy next door who shouldn't have been here at all. I swallowed hard. Maybe she would have understood. Don't be naive, she snapped, then immediately softened. She wouldn't. No one would. The silence was heavy. I should have apologized, backed away, let the moment die. But something in me broke open. I've seen you, I said suddenly, louder than I meant to. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. Every day, walking past my door, carrying yourself like nothing touches you. But I see it, the weight, the regret. And I can't stop. I can't stop noticing you. Her lips parted, breath shaky. For the first time, she didn't look like she wanted to fight the truth. Then she whispered something that knocked the ground out from under me. I noticed you long before you ever knocked on my door. The words hit me harder than anything else could. My chest burned, the room tilted. Everything I thought was one-sided wasn't. For a moment, neither of us breathed. And then she asked, voice trembling but steady enough to ruin me. Her question, "What do we do now?" echoed in my chest long after the words left her lips. I should have had an answer. Instead, I stood there, searching her face, my throat tight. For once, she didn't look guarded. No deflection, no careful distance. Just a woman stripped bare by her own confession. You shouldn't have said that, I murmured. Maybe not, she whispered back. But it's true. The air between us was heavy, charged, impossible to ignore. My hands itched to reach for her, but I held still. She deserved more than a reckless gesture. I don't want to be another mistake you regret, I said finally. Her eyes softened, though sadness flickered behind them. And I don't want to drag you into the wreckage of my life. You're young. You have time to make your own messes without inheriting mine. Don't reduce me to my age. I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. I know what I want. I know who I want. She blinked, stunned by the conviction in my words. Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned, pressing her palms flat against the counter, her shoulders tight. I used to think desire faded with age, she said quietly. That it dulled, that it was safer that way. But then you, she trailed off, shaking her head. You made me remember things I thought I'd buried. Parts of myself I told myself didn't matter anymore. I swallowed hard, my chest aching. So maybe this isn't about me being too young, or you being too old. Maybe it's just us, right now. She laughed softly, but it cracked in the middle. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. The silence that followed felt like standing on a cliff's edge. If either of us moved, everything would change. Slowly, she turned back to me. Her eyes glistened, her breath uneven. She stepped closer, not enough to close the distance, but enough to erase the safety of space. If I let you in, she said, voice trembling, there's no going back. I nodded, pulse racing. Then stop holding the door half open. Her hand reached for mine, hesitant, trembling. When our fingers finally touched, it wasn't fireworks or certainty. It was something quieter, heavier, a choice. She gripped my hand tightly, as if anchoring herself. Stay, she whispered. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the most honest thing she'd said all night. I didn't answer with words. I squeezed her hand back, letting the silence carry everything we couldn't say out loud. For once, we weren't pretending. And for the first time, it felt inevitable. The moment I chose to stay, something in her posture shifted. The tension that had kept her spine rigid for weeks softened, just enough for me to see the woman beneath the armor. Not the neighbor's wife, not someone caught in regret, but simply her. We didn't move quickly. There was no sudden rush into the unknown. Instead, we sat together, hands still joined, as if daring the silence to break us apart. Didn't. After a long stretch of quiet, she spoke. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like," she admitted. "But tonight, I don't want to be alone. Not anymore." Her honesty disarmed me. It wasn't the dramatic declaration of love my younger self might have imagined. It was raw, imperfect, vulnerable, and it meant more than anything rehearsed ever could. I nodded. "Then I'll stay. Not because it's easy, but because I'd regret walking away more than I'd regret any mistake." Her eyes shone with a mixture of fear and relief. She leaned into me then, not in a grand gesture, but in a quiet surrender. The weight of her head against my shoulder felt heavier than any promise, and yet lighter than the loneliness she had carried before. For the first time, I realized that what bound us wasn't just attraction. It was recognition. She saw me, not as a boy, not as a neighbor, but as someone willing to stand in her silence without demanding she be stronger than she was. And I saw her, not as untouchable, not as someone else's, but as a woman who wanted to feel alive again. The night passed in fragments. Laughter at something small, confessions we hadn't meant to share, pauses where words failed but closeness didn't. We never crossed the line we both feared, but we also never stepped back from the edge. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it was everything. By morning, the house looked the same, but something fundamental between us had shifted. When the sunlight crept through the curtains, she turned to me with a look I'll never forget. Fragile, but certain. "This isn't a fairy tale," she said softly. "I don't need it to be," I replied. "I just need it to be real." She smiled then, a small, weary smile that carried more hope than I expected. And in that moment, I knew, whatever came next, gossip, complications, consequences, we'd already made our choice. We were no longer pretending.